Hey everyone, John Lesnick with Insurance Science DM. Today we're fortunate to have with us Arun Mehta, who is our GM and VP of Insurance Marketing and Analytics. So Arun, thanks for taking time, buddy. Spend a little bit of time with us here.
Absolutely. Love to be here.
Yeah, man. So Arun, can you share with us just a little bit about your background and your experience in Medicare Advantage marketing?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been in the industry for about over a decade now, and a lot of my background has been in machine learning, data science. At least that's where I started.
Yeah,
And kind of got transitioned into towards the business area. Learned a lot about Medicare Advantage, worked with carriers, worked on the agency side as well. So it kind of brings in full circle where I have the agency understanding of how the execution happens and also the carrier side of understanding of what's important, why it
yeah.
being that those marketing campaigns.
Been on both
Oh,
sides
that
of
is,
it.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely, and that has tremendously helped me as well in understanding and getting the strategy in place for
Yeah.
those marketing campaigns.
In 10 years, I'm sure you've seen a lot of change. I know we have. I've seen data change more in the last 2 years than I have in the last 20.
Oh,
But
absolutely.
what are some key changes that you've seen in Medicare and the Medicare marketing landscape over the last couple of years?
Oh, absolutely. So one of the things that I always think about is 6 years, 7 years ago, when I went to my first conference, somebody said, "Hey, digital is the new thing, and direct mail is
Right,
failing, and it's never gonna be here." And we are in 2025. Direct mail is actually one of the most prominent channels where everybody wants to be,
right.
and everybody is still talking about digital, but everybody also understands that with with Medicare, you are talking to seniors. So you got to talk their language. You got to understand where they are. You got to understand what they are reading. So that has not changed. But from data perspective, it has evolved so much. I mean, now we have a lot better. We have gotten a lot better in machine learning models. We are able to better understand our prospects and consumers. We are able to target them better. We are able to tailor our messaging a lot better as well. And I would say that from the prospecting side, our seniors are also evolving. I mean, a 65-year-old person 10 years ago is not the same as a 65-year-old person today. The digital landscape has changed a lot,
Yeah.
obviously. So our seniors are very well versed. But still, in terms of targeting, I still think that direct mail kind of brings that credibility and the authenticity that you don't find usually on the digital side. So I would say it's still a mix of targeting. Everything is important when you're targeting. You have to broaden your horizons and make sure that you're reaching the right prospects through the right channels. And, yeah, continue to grow that way.
Yeah, I really think too that, to add to kind of what you're saying, there's something very tangible about direct mail advertising. You're literally putting one of your solicitations in the hands of the reader that you're trying to solicit and often in their home. So like when you think about that, there's a tangibility to it that you don't get with often with digital advertising, right?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Right.
I mean,
Yeah,
you
that
can touch something, feel something. You have a different emotion that you're
yep,
never going to get on TV. Or
right. And it allows for,
yeah,
greater levels of personalization
exactly.
and the
Yeah.
like. So what do you think the key elements of a high performing Medicare Advantage direct mail campaign are?
It's a mix of things, and I would say it that has changed a lot in terms of how you view direct mail piece and how you test too. Because it's obviously like creative and data,
Yeah.
they are both equally important. A lot of times I have heard people say, "Oh, you know what? I have the best machine learning model in place, and I have the best data in the world," but that's not enough either. And I see a lot of times somebody has the best aggressive creative, or I don't want to use the term aggressive, but a very persuasive creative, but they don't have the right targeting and they're just wasting a lot of money. So a mix of both is exceptionally important. You have to know what your consumers are looking for. You have to be continuously testing in this market. We have seen in last 6 years specifically how the CMS guidelines have led to so many changes in the creative
Yeah.
regulations. So you have to be open to be able to adapt those changes and still see how you can get in front of the consumers and get a response. So I would say creative and data both are extremely important. Obviously, you have to make sure your messaging is proper. You have to be continuously testing in this environment. Otherwise, you're gonna lag behind.
Yeah, no doubt. As well as like, I always say if you can't measure something, you can't manage
Oh,
it, right?
absolutely.
So having making sure that you have your attribution logic locked in, you have all your reporting mechanisms for capturing web leads, for capturing phone calls, and being able to tie those back to exposure files to actually get true levels of measurement on it, and or any marketing channel. It doesn't really matter, what the
True.
advertising medium is.
Absolutely. It has
If
to
you're
be
going
all
to
data.
optimize, you have to be able to measure it, right?
Absolutely. It has to be all data driven. I mean, talk about spending millions and millions of dollars, and if you don't have the tracking capabilities or real time analytics when you're looking at digital campaigns or even direct mail campaigns, you have to be able to measure and optimize as quickly as possible.
Yeah,
Otherwise, within a week, you would be out of $1 million and you would have nothing to show for it. So,
yeah.
absolutely right, John.
Yeah, and I'm sure a lot of our listeners and watchers, they're in the thick of it, right? They're in the trenches at carriers, at TPMOs, and they're fighting the good fight just like we are. What types of, like, from a response standpoint right now, what we saw off AEP and then also into OEP, where are we seeing the most success in a general sense on the types of pieces, whether it's general comms that are more full official notice black and white type, or it's a general comm snap pack, or it's branded benefits based snaps. Like, where are we seeing traction,
Sure.
the most traction? And I'm sure there's a lot of variances and
Oh,
variables to it.
absolutely, absolutely. I think that's where the tailoring of the messaging comes into picture, which I
Yep.
mentioned earlier, right? So we gotta have to make sure that we are always going back to what the consumers are looking for and always continuously testing. I mean, there
Yeah.
are consistent packaging that we always use on our site, like 8.5 by 11 letters,
Sure.
which we have seen to be continuously up, which we have optimized over a period of time. Sure, the messaging has evolved, but 8.5 by 11 front and back has always been our winner. Now, in terms of when you say general communication versus benefits, I think we have seen mixed success. You can create a really good general communication piece and still get a lot of good results in
Yeah.
terms of responses. But sometimes the benefit letters, they may not pull enough responses, but the conversions on that are a lot better because now the consumer knows exactly which benefits they are looking for. So I would say benefits are clear winners in terms of overall net yield or in terms of overall cost per acquisition, and that's why we have to be always careful. We have to be always measuring the results, right? It all ties back to that. You can't just look at one KPI and say, hey, this is working better than the other. You have to be always measuring your actual KPIs, which are not
100%.
just responses, not just conversions, but the actual cost per acquisition. What is the cost of doing your business?
Yep. And, I strongly suggest anybody listening and watching this, whether you utilize a company like Insurance Science DM, or, whatever, you do it yourself, or whatever, but make sure that you can properly measure and attribute these campaigns. Like, you need to understand what, different creatives look like in terms of performance, how they react on response and conversion, data segments, geography mixes, certain types of plans that you may be marketing. All, really don't leave any stone unturned, because the game to optimizing here is a tricky one that can be really, it's a road that can be paved with peril if you don't carefully manage it and really understand what you're looking and know how to interpret that data and actually use that to be something meaningful to optimize subsequent campaigns. So
Absolutely. Very,
don't
very
take that lightly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
very well said. I have seen this a lot of times too, like in terms of measuring success, because I mean, most of the times you have multi-touch attribution, right? I mean, you are
Yep.
touching the same consumer through digital campaigns, you have the direct mail campaigns, you have TV, and I have seen with a lot of companies out there that they don't do multi-touch attribution really, really well. They would usually consider just the last touch at the source of truth. Hey, we sent a direct mail
Yeah.
piece and this was the last thing we did, or we had a digital campaign, that was the last thing we did. It's extremely important to be able to understand what halos are created based on each digital campaign and
Right.
other channels that you're using, digital or not, right? So extremely important point. Well said, John.
How do we let's talk about data a little bit, right? So how do you ensure that mailers are reaching the right audiences?
It's tricky, right? I mean, so in industry generally, I'll tell you what everybody does and how we separate ourselves and how we differentiate in the industry. So in the industry, a general trend is, hey, we have a consumer database, we can build a response model, we can build a conversion model, you put that on top of it, and that will give you like the 1 million records or 2 million prospects you want to reach out to. The problem
Yeah.
with that
Most responsive, highest converting.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. But the problem with that methodology, John, is that you are not looking at audiences who are activated, who are actually shopping, who are actually interested in the product. You are trying to create an activated audience, right?
Yeah.
That requires multiple touches. You may have to reach reach out to them through an email, through SMS, through direct mail, and even then you don't know if they're actually going to shop or not. So what we have done is we are still utilizing that process down the line for further optimization. Changed our database to something we call a trigger database, and our solution is called Trigger IQ. So in that, what we do is we have a lot of different data sources that we utilize. We have tested more than, I would say, probably around 1,000 data sources in the last 6 years, and we continue to optimize on them every month. So, and we are continuously sourcing about 40 to 50 sources every month, and testing on 4 to 5 every month. So what that process does is, now you are looking for shoppers who are shopping for products and services online. Now these don't have to be exactly Medicare Advantage products and services. They could be ancillary products and services which define the behaviors of the consumers, saying that, hey, if consumer X likes this thing, they are a good responder and a converter for Medicare Advantage as well. So we have understood and learned those behaviors over a period of time, and we are utilizing that to optimize each month. And because of that, we have created an activated audience set. Now, where it takes 5 or 6 touches to activate an audience, for us it's already activated. So we save a lot of money on that front. We save a lot of cost for our clients.
Sure.
And
Higher
because
response rates when you're marketing to shoppers,
exactly,
right? You're
exactly.
marketing
So
people looking for your product or service instead of
exactly,
just guessing at it or statistically
absolutely
modeling
right.
towards a person that would have a higher propensity to
Absolutely
respond or
right.
shop.
So that still replaces our base database, and then we still have our machine learning models, and all of our machine learning models are AI driven, and we use them to build our audiences from that, and that helps us. So instead of looking at 65 million seniors, we are looking at maybe 30 million seniors who are actually shopping. So that helps us tremendously. We reduce cost per acquisitions out the gate for any campaign by like 20% without even doing anything, just by replacing with our
Yeah.
database.
Yep.
And over a period of time, we can reduce cost per acquisition by up to 50% to
Yep.
60%.
And we can do it at scale too, which is important.
Yes,
We have
yes,
over 1,850 feeds that are essentially coming in our eTrigger database
absolutely.
on a
Yes,
daily basis. So, we're taking that trigger data basically and we're appending that to all sorts of demographic data and econometric
yes,
data and all sorts of other stuff that we use to build these, high intent,
right. Audiences.
high activation audiences. You guys
Right.
will hear us say that word a lot, but we refer to response, not just as response, but actually, because response doesn't really matter in itself, but how do we activate
Exactly.
audiences? How do we get them
Yeah.
to take
Like,
a formal action forward that's of value to our customers and typically of economic value to our customers? So, there have been a lot of recent regulatory changes at CMS. We saw some big ones in 22 and 21 and then on the like. What are some of the best ways you think of maintaining performance through some of these changes that sometimes can be broad and hard, either one, hard to interpret,
yes,
right? Or hard to interpret on how to apply. And what I mean by
yes,
that is how will one group apply this over another group,
yes.
and the like. So what are some ways you think that can marketers can migrate their way through those through.
Yeah. I think it's important to understand that it's not a 1 year play, right? A lot of times we look at
Yeah.
Medicare Advantage marketing and we say, hey, we want to get prospects in at the lowest cost per acquisition. That's the only
Yep.
goal. What we need to do is we need to get out of that mindset and think of it as a long game, because it's also about lifetime value. It's also about when you actually do an acquisition, are you able to actually place those prospects into an actual sale, meaning that are they actually activating that application or not, or they're just shopping with somebody else right after they bought with you. So we need to get out of that mindset first, right? So
Yeah.
when you start looking at the CMS guidelines, I understand they make things difficult, but at the end of the day, they are doing it because they want to help. So understanding those guidelines is extremely important, obviously, and we do that really, really well. And we talk to our carriers. We can understand, okay, what is your goal for the next 2 years, for the next 5 years, and it's important to continuously evolve your campaigns based on those goals as well, because you may look at cost per acquisition and say that, okay, I'm maintaining my cost per acquisition at $400 or at $300, But that may not be enough, right? Because
Yeah.
it's possible that you may have a $400 cost per acquisition, but you have a very high attrition. All of the members that you have acquired, they leave within 2 years, right? So you don't want that either. So understanding CMS guidelines will help you navigate through some of those challenges, because at the end of the day, they want you to make sure that you are not just acquiring, or you're just not throwing marketing out there and acquiring customers for the sake of acquiring new members. They
Yeah.
want you to create value for those members and create benefits for those members which are actually useful for those members. So you have to engage with the carriers. You have to engage and understand what benefits are being utilized, how they can be provided to the members, and you have to improve your creatives and targeting based on that. So if CMS says that, okay, you shouldn't do aggressive marketing, that's absolutely right, because you have to create a value in the marketing as well, right? For the consumers who are going to be reading your mailers, or who are going to be looking at your digital ads, or however you're marketing. So you have to make sure you're also providing value to the consumers in the pieces that you're sending out, while you're trying to maintain your cost per acquisition. And at the end, and on the back end, you're creating a lifetime value. So
Yeah.
all of those pieces fit together.
Those are that's a good word. What are some of the you talk about ROI, we talk about value, LTV, all those kind of things. But what do you think some of the best ways of measuring ROI on in Medicare marketing are?
Yeah, I think ties back to the lifetime value. Don't look at cost per acquisition as the sole measure of things. You may have an agency that you're working with who might be a little bit more expensive than the others. Totally can happen. But if they're giving you a better measurement or a better value on those acquisitions, then they are a better partner for you. And in addition to that, I mean, don't look at just marketing, because marketing is just one aspect of this. If Make sure you're counting all your costs as well while you're measuring your ROI, because sometimes you just look at the cost of executing the marketing, but you don't look at your data cost, you don't look at your manpower cost that goes into it. All of those things are exceptionally important to be included when you're looking at net profitability of the prospect that comes in. So
No
back end
doubt.
costs are important, the future lifetime value revenue is important. Include all those metrics.
Let's talk about response rates. So what response rates should marketers expect from a well-optimized direct mail campaign during AEP? Or we can even talk about like last AEP,
Sure.
because the future, we don't have a crystal ball to be able to
Right.
see how consumers react to the AEP in the future. But roughly speaking, let's talk about e-trigger, and then also like demographic data with aggressive modeling, I should say, like very
Sure.
high, highly optimized modeling put on top of that.
Sure thing. I mean, it all depends on the scale, right? I mean, you could mail out 100,000 prospects with the
Hmm.
demographic database and put the best modeling on top of it, and you could receive 4 to 5% in terms of response rates, but you're not going to be able to scale that. When it comes to scaling to 10 million, 20 million prospects, your response rate will likely come down to 30 bips or 40 bips.
Yep.
What That's why it's important to have the targeted market. So when we go back and look at our marketing, and that what we have done at scale, we are easily able to get anywhere between 1% to 2.5%, John. On the smaller segments, if we look at
Big
100
delta.
500,000 records, we have responses as much as 5 to 6%, 8% responses.
Yeah,
And
that's a big delta.
it is. That's why whenever I talk to my clients, I always tell them, don't look at what you can do at 50,000 records or 50,000 prospects or 100,000 prospects. You want to grow. So what does that pathway looks like for you? That is extremely important to understand. So we can. That's where we create a little bit of a different roadmap with our clients. We don't talk about just today or just a small prospect of targeting. We talk about scaling as well with them.
Yeah.
That's extremely important.
Yeah,
And
it's super important because anybody, we get like Arun said, 5 to 8% response rates, right? But you're also going to be dealing with very small populations of people in
exactly.
which you can achieve that. So you got to look at like scalability of a solution
Yes.
and make sure like if you're out there, watching this and you're using an outsourced provider, be careful when you're testing with them to make sure that they're doing we refer to it as randomenting on the
Yes.
campaign. So
Correct.
if you're trying to get X amount of policies and that equates based on a given response rate to I'll just say whatever, a million records to achieve that
Correct.
goal. Well, don't have them select the best 50 if
Exactly.
that's at 50,000, if that's your test, because you're going to have very skewed, statistically
Exactly.
invalid results in which
Yes.
to base your business model
Yes.
on. So it's important you can take that million records You randomly net it down to the 50 that you're going to mail, and that
Yep.
will give you a reasonable, I mean, it's not exactly the same, but 50 to 100K or whatever will give you a reasonable idea of maybe what to
Yep.
expect at the million quantity,
Correct.
right?
Correct. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I see this all the time. We run small campaigns, and I have talked to our competitors too
Yeah.
and different agencies. I hear 10%, 15%, 11% response rate, and I'm like, that's great, but can you do that at 20 million prospects? And they're like,
No,
oh, yeah, no,
you
that's
do
not
it
possible.
20,000.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
that's why when you talk to us at Insurance Science DM, we are not going to tell you that we're going to produce 10% response rates. First of all, we're going to talk to you about cost per acquisition
Yeah.
because
And
that's
what your
the
business
metrics
goals
that
are, right?
counts,
Like,
right?
yeah, what are your needs?
Exactly. So we will align our KPI goals with yours. We are
Yeah.
not just going to talk about response rates. We're going to ask you, okay, what does your conversion look like on the back end? How is your agent management? What are your pain points on the back end too, right? So that's another thing that we help with too. So consistent lead flow and how to make sure that you're managing the call volume on the back end too, because that's another cost metrics, right? You lose a lot of money if your agents are sitting around, and
Yep.
you also lose a lot of money if the calls are going to the floor and nobody's there to pick them up because now you have too many calls. So we help
100%.
exactly. So we
Yeah.
help manage that as well. So your marketing dollars are not going to waste.
Yeah. So, how can direct mail be integrated with digital marketing strategies?
Oh, that's a great question, John. There are multiple ways to do it. One is obviously to ensure that you have the right kind of graphics when it comes to digital and direct mail. You're just not looking at one thing. And the other thing is to make sure that you are, when you're targeting, what does that overlap look like?
So, Arun, where do you see the future of Medicare Advantage direct mail heading?
That's that's a great question, John. First of all, there's a lot that goes into it. I think marketing is still going to be very integrated across all the channels. I do believe people are looking for more quality content. I see
Yeah.
everywhere that there are like thousands of lead gen companies out there who are generating leads for everybody else, and that's just not sustainable, that's just not doable. So I do feel like with the help of CMS and private companies out there, we should be able to get to a point where we are creating more value for the consumers and the prospects out there. I do believe that marketing is going to be more streamlined going into next 4 to 5 years, 10 years. Direct mail is still going to play a critical role because I do believe the next 15 to 20 years, that channel is going to stay very, very strong. Digital is going to have to improve, absolutely, because there is just so much material out there that's irrelevant, that's actually not digestible sometimes, and sometimes it's overcrowding the market. So I think the digital needs to be streamlined more. Obviously, TV is still going to play a critical role going forward. I do see that a lot of marketing is going to move towards CTV as well, which is not a big channel right now. I do see that developing over a period of time, and for sure YouTube as well.
Cool. Arun, I really appreciate your time. Thank you very much. I'm sure everybody else values your input. You're exposed to literally thousands and thousands of lines of data on this stuff on a monthly basis. And I know you're really into the nitty gritty of it. So certainly appreciate your expertise.
Thank you, John. Thank you for
Yeah,
having me.
thank you. Yep. Bye.